Vice President Pence visits the troops in Iraq, and what in the world is happening now in Syria? Let's talk about it on today's Hot Zone. Hey folks, Chuck Holton here, and I'm just out in my backyard today because it is so beautiful, such a beautiful afternoon. I just couldn't be in the studio, and so I thought I'd treat you to this, although it's kind of windy up on the rooftop, so that's why I'm out here. But let's talk about what's going on over there in Iraq. Let me ask you a question. How many U.S. troops do you think have died in the fight against ISIS? Would you say 100, 50, 25? How about less than 10? Probably 7 or 8, depending on how you count it. How many Kurdish forces have died in the fight against ISIS? You probably know that number because I've talked about it a lot. How about 12,000? How many civilians have died during the Syrian civil war? Something like 500,000 people. So this is why, I mean, look, I'm glad that we've got President Trump, and I'm very happy with many of his policies. And I think he really screwed up on this whole Syria thing. If you've been watching me, you know that, because, you know, when you're on the ground over there, you get a different perspective that I can't even expect the U.S. president to have. But when you're there with the SDF and they're getting bombed by the Turks, and the president and the vice president are saying stuff like this.
As you all know, 1 week ago, Turkish forces crossed into Syria. Earlier this week, President Trump took decisive action and called on Turkey to stand down, to end the violence, and agree to come to the table for negotiations. And today I'm proud to report, thanks to the President's strong leadership, the United States and Turkey have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria.
Well, okay, I was there in Syria when the vice president made that statement, and obviously there is no ceasefire. There was no ceasefire. There has been no ceasefire. There's still no ceasefire. And that whole 30-kilometer area that Turkey was talking about, that they agreed with the president to take and create a safety zone in there, it's more like a genocide zone, but it's not only that 30-kilometer area. It's not limited to that. Now, in the area around Kobani, which is pretty far outside of that, in a place called Ainisa, I got this video yesterday from Dave Eubanks. Check it out.
This is 23 November 2019. We're here in Ainisa. That's the Ainisa refugee camp. Attacked today. There's the shooting of the Turks and Free Syrian Army trying to come into Ainisa. And this is a terrible invasion that has not stopped yet. So thanks for listening. And these people are trying to hold off the oncoming attack. God bless you, Dave.
Good job. Oh, see? There's injuries. Injuries right there. He got hit directly.
So the Turks and the FSA are still bombing the heck out of everything in sight. There's no ceasefire whatsoever, and that's just the way it is. Now, in the meantime, the vice president went to Iraq to visit U.S. troops there. Now, the president seems very concerned about getting the U.S. troops home from overseas. And so he was very hot to remove or to bring home the 1,200 or so troops that we had in Syria. So because the president got so much pushback from that, he kind of realized it was a bad idea. And so he's quietly sent 600 troops back in there. And now they've just restarted combat operations alongside the SDF in Deir ez-Zor. Deir ez-Zor is where I was in February. They're still in the mopping up phases of cleaning out ISIS holdouts in that area. And so this is not U.S. troops helping the SDF in their fight against the Turks or the FSA. This is the U.S. troops supporting the SDF in their fight against what's left of ISIS. And yes, there still are some elements left of ISIS. And so that's not really helpful so much against for the SDF, because the majority of the places where they're getting wiped out is in the north, fighting against the Turks and the FSA. That's where INISA is. That's where Dave Eubank is. And so that's what really that's where they need the help. Now, when the U.S. says that they're fighting alongside the SDF, what they mean is we're sending air support in to drop bombs on places that the SDF asks us to. We don't have troops on the ground in combat. There are a few special operations guys doing a very limited special ops missions in there, and there are some intelligence guys that are there to interview any ISIS guys that we actually do that the SDF actually is able to capture or anything like that. But don't let yourself be fooled into thinking that the U.S. has troops on the ground in Syria that are engaged in heavy combat. It's just not the truth. Now, it's very common, very traditional for the vice president or the president to go make a surprise visit of the troops overseas and do that for Thanksgiving or Christmas. That's what Vice President Pence did over the weekend in Iraq. Now, here is some of what he had to say there.
The Armed Forces of the United States of America, it is Thanksgiving week, and it is our great honor to be here today to say thank you for your service here at the tip of the Spear Al Assad Air Base, Iraq. Give yourselves a round of applause. America's proud of every single one of you.
Because I know they're the home front heroes, and they're keeping things going at home. So if you would please, the next time you talk to your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your spouse, your kids, your parents, tell them that we are so grateful for their service as well. Thanks, everybody.
Here at Al Assad Air Base, you prove every day what the world knows. The armed forces of the United States are the greatest force for good the world has ever known, and you are that force. Today, in budget negotiations with Congress, I'm proud to report to you that we're fighting to secure another pay raise for the men and women in our military, and it'll be the biggest in 9 years. We're going to keep it coming. But we need Congress to do their job. My fellow Americans gathered here, the truth is Congress should have finished their work on defense appropriations months ago. But you all know that partisan politics and endless investigations have slowed things down a bit in Washington, D.C., but I'll make you a promise. This president, this vice president, and our administration will never stop fighting until we get you, our troops, the resources you need to accomplish your mission and defend this nation. So help me God.
Thanks for your service. We're proud of you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, so he had the typical rah-rah stuff to say to the troops. Here's something interesting. While the vice president was in Iraq, he went to meet with the prime minister of Kurdistan there in Erbil. Remember, Kurdistan is northern Iraq. They're one and the same. It's a semi-autonomous region of Iraq, self-administrated government there by the Kurds. He went and met with the Kurds to reassure them that we are still their allies. That's got to be kind of ironic to the Kurds who are there, whose people are fighting, being killed by the Turks. And here's Vice President Pence talking with the Kurdish Prime Minister.
And I want to extend to you first and foremost the greetings and the respect of President Donald Trump. And I want to thank you, though, Mr. President, for making time for an important opportunity to discuss the enduring bond that exists between the Kurdish people and the people of the United States of America. To capture the last inch of territory controlled by ISIS in Syria, and this would not have been possible without the extraordinary alliance and partnership? My sense is that that now with our troops in the region and in the air, that Kurdish forces, Syrian democratic forces, as well as the Kurdish population here in the Kurdish region, know that the American people are with them. These are allies who fought shoulder to shoulder with us, bravely, sacrificed greatly to defeat ISIS, not only in Iraq but in Syria. And they know now that while President Trump is absolutely determined to bring our troops home, and that was the basis of the president's decision in moving our troops out of the border region on the Syrian-Turkish border, that nevertheless we're going to continue to maintain a presence in Syria and, of course, here in Iraq that reflects the strong and enduring partnership that we have with the Iraqi people, including the Kurdish people in Iraq and in Syria. I don't think there was any confusion now among the leadership here in the Kurdish region that President Trump's commitment to our allies here in Iraq, as well as to those in the Syrian Defense Forces, the Kurdish forces who fought alongside us, is unchanging. But look, President Trump is always going to look for opportunities to bring our troops home, to take these men and women out of harm's way, but making it clear to our allies in this region, as the President has done, that those who fight alongside us, that we will stand with them and ensure their ability to create the kind of stability and long-term opportunity for prosperity will continue to be a goal. I could tell in speaking to President Barzani and his team that they know the American people are with them, and we're going to continue to build this long-term relationship with all the people of Iraq, including in the Kurdish region, and we're going to continue to ensure that our Kurdish allies in Syria have access to those oil reserves that will make it possible for them to see to their interest and their security.
Now, while he was there, he also had a phone call with the president of Iraq, prime minister of Iraq. And it's interesting and kind of telling that he didn't go meet with that guy, because the protests that are taking place right now in Baghdad and in the Shia controlled areas of Iraq are deadly every day. They had 9 more killed yesterday. The troops that are putting down those protests, they don't use rubber bullets, they use real bullets, and they're killing people. Apparently have killed something close to 200 people already in those riots. And really what those riots are all about, if you didn't catch the piece that I did on CBN about this, is these are Shia and Sunni young people who are unemployed, angry. There are very few public services available to them. This is in a country that has more oil than Kuwait. This is a country that has 10% of the world's proven oil reserves, and they can't provide garbage pickup, health care, education, even consistent electricity or running water to their people. And that's mostly because of the incredible amount of corruption in the Iraqi government, which is essentially a puppet government run by Iran. Iran worked very hard, even since 2003, to get its fingers into every level of Iraqi government, and now they are pulling the strings. And so that Shia-led government in Baghdad is really a puppet government led by Iran. And actually, over the last week, there were kind of a release of some classified documents, over 700 pages worth, that detail just how deep into the Iraqi government the Iranian government has its fingers. And that's part of the reason why everybody is protesting in Baghdad. Unfortunately, as Vice President Pence spoke with the PM in Baghdad, one of the things they talked about was these riots, and the vice president was looking for reassurance from the Iraqi government that they are going to respect human rights, even as the police in Baghdad were literally shooting protesters with real bullets.
Well, what I heard from President Barzani today, as well as the Prime Minister here and the rest of their officials, was that they are greatly encouraged by President Trump's decision to maintain troops in Syria, to secure the oil fields so that they don't fall into the hands of either ISIS or Iran or the Syrian regime, but rather that those oil resources are available for the Kurdish people in Syria. We spoke about the unrest that's been taking place in recent weeks here in Iraq. He assured me that they were working to avoid violence or the kind of repression that we see taking place even as we speak in Iran. And he pledged to me that they would work to protect and respect peaceful protesters as a part of the democratic process here in Iraq. I also encouraged him to listen to those who are protesting and their calls for reform. It was something President Barzani and I also spoke about, issues of governance here. We have a strong partnership with the Iraqi people, forged in the fires of war. We liberated Iraq from dictatorship. With our allies, we've liberated Iraq again from the clutches of ISIS. And they, as I told Prime Minister Al-Mahdi, as I told President Barzani here in the Kurdish region, the United States is prepared to partner with them further to ensure that their governance and meeting the needs of their people is achieved, and those objectives for long-term security and prosperity happen. President Trump's commitment is to an independent and sovereign Iraq. We continue to be concerned about the malign influence of Iran across Iraq. President Trump has been very clear about that. I spoke with Prime Minister Al-Mahdi about that, as well as the leadership here in the Kurdish region government, just to make sure they understand that our commitment is to the Iraqi people. We want to see an Iraq that is free of the malign influence of Iran and is also respecting the rights and the voices of all of its people.
And so they've had thousands of people injured in those protests and something like a couple hundred killed now, like I said. So that's all I've got for today, folks. Boy, that area is really a powder keg. It has been for a long time. A lot of people wonder, why in the world would we want to be involved there? We ought to just bring our troops home and let those people kill each other. But again, you got to remember that if the United States is not involved in places like this, we cannot be a world leader, and somebody else will be. That'll be China, that'll be Russia, that'll be Iran. And so if we don't want China, Russia, and Iran dictating world politics, then we have got to be involved in these areas. And that's just a hard, cold reality of being a world power. So I hope you have a great day. We're going to have a couple more episodes of the podcast coming up this week. And then we're going to take some time off Thursday, Friday for Thanksgiving. So have a great week. Talk to you later.